Hi, this is Trevor Conquergood. Welcome to this week's RNK Software Club's video for the week. And our topic is about the combine and break apart tools and how they're really used to, join two shapes together and create almost like a voided area of your, sort of bigger shape. So here, let's get started. And I'm just going to use my basic shapes tool to draw a few shapes. I'll click and drag and make a nice big rectangle, and then use the ellipse tool to put, a shape on top, maybe grab a triangle, same idea. And so here now we have three shapes. If you look in the sequence view over on the right, you can see that there's three individual shapes. And if I click on, for example, the triangle and select it and click on fill, it will fill in the triangle. And if I click on the sort of rectangle and click on fill, it'll fill in the rectangle. And so the rectangle and the triangle are both filled. The triangle sews directly on top of the rectangle. You can tell the triangle's on top because in the sewing sequence, the triangle comes after the rectangle. So whatever comes first will sew first. The circle or the ellipse is still a piece of artwork. So although it's there, it's not, stitched. You could select it and, obviously convert that into embroidery as well. Now, all in the same color, this doesn't always sort of make a lot of sense, but you could easily have these as second colors that stitched on top. If they were sewing on top and the area underneath was large enough, you might want to remove the stitching underneath. And so in that case, we do what's known as remove overlap stitching. So you can select on your triangle and you can right click and choose remove overlap stitching. Now it asks you how much allowed overlap do you want to give. So rather than putting all the stitching along the exact same line, you can give it a 0.5 millimeter or millimeter, space. And so that creates a boundary. Essentially what happened is the triangle trimmed a hole outside of the sort of rectangle, exactly 1 millimeter to the inside. So if you look kind of really closely where those two are joined, maybe turn off 3D, you'll see, well, it's hard to see with the light blue color, what if I just select it, that there's an overlapped area here. And that's the 1 millimeter overlap. And so this is just one idea, but the way that we removed the stitches, remember, I selected the fill that was on top, and I used my right click to do what's known as remove overlap stitches. And when I choose that option, I get the question, how much do you want to allow? And however much you choose is what you get. And when you say OK, the software it basically uses the shape on top to trim the shape underneath with an allowed overlap amount. And so that is one way. However, what we really did was we created a rectangle that has two holes in it. Let's just bring it down here and look at it. Now, we still have three shapes on our screen. We have the original ellipse, the original triangle, and we now have our sort of rectangle. And our rectangle also has an inside boundary that voids out the ellipse and voids out the triangle. Now, because this is already filled in with stitches, if you wanted to remove one of the holes, you could go to your shape tool, and that shows you all the points that make up those holes. And if you right click over top of the points on the outline, you can choose the the option delete hole. So that gets rid of the hole. And so if you have an area of fill that has a hole in it, you can remove it. Only I said today's lesson was going to be about using break apart and combine, but we haven't been using break apart and combine. We've been using the options for remove overlap stitches, and then we used the option for deleting the hole. So how are these things different? And because they're very similar. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on the rectangle that currently has a hole in it for the triangle, and I'm going to click on the artwork tool. So basically that's like an eraser. It takes all the thread out of the shape and it lets you see what's there. And so you can see that there's one piece of artwork that has an outside boundary and an inside boundary. And so whenever you have a shape such as this, that means those two shapes are combined together. And you can tell because when you look in the sequence area, it's all one shape, even though there's really two boundaries. And notice up at the top, my break apart tool is now lit up, brightly colored. Because I have a combined shape selected, I could therefore break it apart. Combine won't come up until you have two shapes selected that are, both selected, and then you can combine them. But right now I could break apart. So let's click on break apart and notice now that I have kind of like a rectangle and a triangle. And I know that this triangle is going to be smaller than that triangle because remember when I made it, I used the remove overlaps tool in the software. And so this triangle would have kind of like a small sort of like margin, which was just that little bit smaller than the original one. All right, now we have in actuality 4 shapes on our screen. And I just want to point out, if I grab my original rectangle and put it over top of the original circle and the original triangle, if I select all 3 of those things, combine does not become available. Why? Well, that's because I have an artwork and then I have a fill and a fill. So what I really need to do if I want to use combine is select the ellipse and click back on the artwork tool. Get rid of that stitching. Now we can select the ellipse and hold down Control and select the outer boundary. So we have those 2 things selected. And if we click combine, notice up at the top, combine is available. They become welded back together again or joined back together. So now if you look at it filled, we have an area that's a rectangle that has a void for the ellipse, not for the triangle though. The triangle still got stitching in it, right? So had I wanted to combine all 3 of them together, I would again need to take the stitching out of the triangle because you can sort of like combine artwork together with artwork, but not combine artwork together with stitches. So that's the reason. So just basically click on the artwork tool to get rid of the stitches and then select all of those things and use combine. And then now you end up with one shape. Notice that I have one shape that has a voided area for both the ellipse and the triangle. And so when you use, combine to combine 2 things together, it tells the software that you want to have a voided sort of inside area. And so it's very similar to doing it because, of course, you can stitch this in with thread now. So, but remember the difference. So when I use the combine tool, the exact shapes get combined together. When I have a triangle that's stitched on top of this, any kind of a fill. So let's just do that again here. When I have a small triangle and it's on top of this fill and that triangle is stitched and on top, because right now it's currently underneath. So let's just sequence it to the top. So when you have 2 shapes that are, overlapping and they're both stitched, you can select the shape that's on top and right click to remove overlap stitches. So it keeps the original triangle that's on top and it voids out the area underneath. It gives you the ability to have an overlap. So that's the real difference, is the overlap, because at the end of the day, if I do this, you know that I'm going to end up with a rectangle that has 3 holes in it now. So if I click on it and move the triangle over, you'll see the hole that we just removed. So combine artwork or remove overlap stitches really do kind of create a very similar effect. The big difference is you have the ability to choose an overlap distance. So if you're planning on having a fill and a voided area underneath, then that overlap distance is important. If you're just planning on having a rectangle with a circle and a triangle cut out of it, well, then you don't necessarily need the overlap amount. Either way, it's 2 tools, 2 techniques that you can use that both either, add a hole to a design or remove a hole to design. So if you want 2 different ways to remove the hole now, just to review, select your shape, go onto your shape tool. If you're keeping it in stitches and you just want to get rid of one of the holes, right click over top of the hole and choose over the point of the hole, I guess, or the outline, delete hole. So that gets rid of one hole from your design. If you wanted to keep the holes, you could convert it to artwork and use your break apart tool. And now we're right back to where we started from. We've got a rectangle and a triangle and an ellipse. And so I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope you enjoyed learning more about the combine tool, the break apart tool, as well as remove overlaps and how to delete holes. Until next week, have a great day. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.